White man finds black twins at his son's grave, then breaks down when he discovers their connection. Michael Davidson stood at the entrance of Oakwood Cemetery, clutching a bouquet of white lilies, his son Tommy's favorite flowers. At 45, grief had aged him beyond his years, turning his once brown hair prematurely gray and etching deep lines around his eyes. 6 months had passed since the accident that took his only child, but the pain remained as fresh as the day he received that devastating phone call. As a prominent surgeon at Boston General Hospital, Michael had spent his career saving other people's children. The irony that he couldn't save his own son haunted him daily. Tommy had been just 17, a bright and compassionate boy who dreamed of following in his father's footsteps. The drunk driver who hit him had walked away with minor injuries and a suspended sentence. The loss had shattered Michael's carefully constructed world. His wife, Sarah, unable to cope with their shared grief, had moved back to her parents' home in California. Their marriage, already strained by Michael's demanding career, couldn't survive the weight of their son's death. Now he lived alone in their large suburban home, surrounded by memories and regrets. Tommy had been special, not just to his parents, but to everyone who knew him. Despite attending an exclusive private school, he had spent his weekends volunteering at the local community center, tutoring underprivileged kids in science and math. He had a gift for connecting with people, breaking down barriers of race and class with his genuine warmth and infectious smile. Michael's weekly visits to the cemetery had become a ritual, a way to maintain some connection to his son. Usually, he arrived early in the morning when the grounds were empty, allowing him to sit by Tommy's grave and talk about his week, just as they used to do over dinner. These one-sided conversations were all he had left of their relationship. This particular morning, however, was different. As Michael walked the familiar path to Tommy's grave, he noticed something unusual in the distance. 2 figures huddled by his son's headstone. As he drew closer, he could make out that they were young African-American boys, perhaps 12 or 13 years old. Identical twins, both wearing well-worn clothes that spoke of limited means. The sight stopped Michael in his tracks. In 6 months, he had never encountered anyone else at Tommy's grave. Who were these children? And why were they crying at his son's final resting place? Little did Michael know that his approach to these mysterious visitors would set in motion a chain of events that would challenge everything he thought he knew about his son's life and legacy. Michael's first instinct was to hang back, observing the scene from a respectful distance. The twins were clearly emotional, their shoulders shaking with quiet sobs as they knelt before Tommy's headstone. One boy reached out to trace the engraved letters of Tommy's name, while the other placed what appeared to be a hand-drawn card among the weathered flowers. Something about their genuine grief made Michael hesitate to interrupt. These weren't vandals or casual visitors. Their behavior spoke of a deep personal connection to his son. But how was that possible? Tommy had attended Brunswick Preparatory Academy, an exclusive private school miles away from any neighborhood these boys likely called home. Finally, his need to understand overcame his reluctance to intrude on their private moment. Michael cleared his throat softly as he approached, not wanting to startle them. The boys jumped at the sound, quickly wiping their eyes as they turned to face him. Their expressions shifted from surprise to recognition, then to something that looked almost like guilt. "I'm sorry," the boy on the left said quickly, grabbing his brother's arm. "We didn't mean any disrespect." "We'll leave," the other twin added, already starting to back away. "Wait," Michael called out, keeping his voice gentle. "Please, I'm Tommy's father. I'd like to know how you knew my son." The twins exchanged a look that seemed to carry an entire conversation. Finally, the slightly taller one spoke up. "I'm Marcus, and this is my brother Malcolm. Tommy. He was our tutor at the community center." "More than that," Malcolm added softly, "he was our friend." Michael felt a mix of emotions wash over him. Tommy had mentioned tutoring at the center, but he had never gone into detail about his students. Like many aspects of his son's life, Michael had been too busy with his surgical practice to ask for more information. "He was teaching us advanced math," Marcus continued, gaining confidence as he spoke. "Said we had real potential. His voice cracked slightly. He was helping us prepare for the Brunswick scholarship exam. Said we could get in just like he did if we worked hard enough. The revelation hit Michael like a physical blow. He hadn't known about this, hadn't known that his son was helping these boys reach for the same opportunities he had enjoyed. The Brunswick scholarship was highly competitive, offering 2 full-ride positions each year to exceptional students from underprivileged backgrounds. The exam was supposed to be next week, Malcolm said, his eyes filling with fresh tears. We still studied everything Tommy taught us, but he gestured helplessly at the grave. It won't be the same without him there. Michael found himself moving closer, drawn by the boys' obvious pain and the glimpse they offered into a side of his son he had never fully known. As he approached, he noticed the card they had left was covered with complex mathematical equations, problems solved using methods he recognized as Tommy's unique way of breaking down difficult concepts. He believed in us, Marcus said simply. Nobody else ever did. Not like that. The words struck something deep inside Michael. Here were 2 children who had seen and appreciated a side of Tommy that he, consumed by his own expectations and career, had sometimes overlooked. His son's capacity for genuine compassion and his ability to transform lives through small acts of kindness. Just then, a sharp gust of wind caught the card, threatening to blow it away. Both twins moved to grab it, but Michael was closer. As he caught the paper, his eyes fell on a note written on the back. We won't let you down, Tommy. Thanks for showing us what we could become. Standing there, holding this testament to his son's impact on lives he had known nothing about, Michael felt something shift inside him. The grief that had isolated him for 6 months began to transform into something else. A need to understand this legacy his son had left behind, and perhaps find a way to ensure it lived on. The inciting incident that had begun with 2 crying boys at a graveside was about to lead Michael down a path he never expected, one that would challenge his preconceptions and offer a chance at healing he hadn't thought possible. As Michael stood with the twins at Tommy's grave, more details about his son's secret life began to emerge. Marcus and Malcolm, gaining confidence from Michael's genuine interest, shared stories that painted a picture of a young man far more involved in their lives than simple tutoring would suggest. Tommy didn't just help us with math, Malcolm explained, pulling out a worn notebook. He came to our basketball games at the community center, even taught us to play chess. Marcus nodded eagerly. He said chess was like surgery. You have to think 10 steps ahead and consider all the possibilities. Said that's how his dad thinks when he's saving lives. Michael's throat tightened. He had taught Tommy chess when he was young, using that exact analogy. To learn that his son had passed this lesson on, connecting it to these boys' lives in meaningful ways, struck him deeply. But the true revelation came when the twins revealed why they had chosen this particular morning to visit the grave. We got these yesterday, Marcus said, hesitantly pulling 2 envelopes from his backpack. They're from Brunswick Prep. With trembling hands, Malcolm opened his envelope. Tommy helped us fill out the applications before the accident. Said he'd already talked to the scholarship committee about us. Michael took the letter Malcolm offered him, his eyes widening as he read. Not only had the twins both been accepted, but they had each been awarded full scholarships. The acceptance letter mentioned their extraordinary recommendation from current student Thomas Davidson, whose tragic passing has left a void in our community. There's more, Marcus added softly, pulling out another piece of paper. It was an email printout, dated just days before the accident. In it, Tommy had written to Brunswick's scholarship committee, passionately advocating for the twins. He had attached their practice test scores, samples of their work, and a detailed account of their progress. The final paragraph hit Michael like a physical blow. Marcus and Malcolm represent everything Brunswick claims to value: intelligence, determination, and character. Their circumstances have given them fewer opportunities, but they have never used this as an excuse. They remind me daily that privilege isn't just something to enjoy, but something to share. They've taught me more about courage and perseverance than I could ever teach them about mathematics. As Michael absorbed these words, another revelation struck him. The night of the accident, Tommy had been driving home late from the community center. Michael had always assumed he had been there for his regular tutoring session, but now he was helping us prepare our final scholarship essays, Malcolm confirmed quietly, seeming to read Michael's thoughts. Said he wanted to make sure they were perfect before the deadline. The weight of this discovery nearly brought Michael to his knees. His son's last acts had been dedicated to helping these boys secure a better future. Tommy had seen something special in them, something worth investing his time and energy into nurturing. Through his tears, Michael looked at the twins with new eyes. They weren't just random students his son had tutored. They were living proof of Tommy's compassion, his belief in making a difference in the world. In their achievements, his son's dreams and values would live on. This revelation would change everything. As Michael stood there, surrounded by evidence of his son's secret legacy, he knew he could never go back to simply grieving alone. There was work to be done, a torch to be carried forward, and 2 young lives that still needed the kind of support and belief that Tommy had provided. After spending several hours listening to Marcus and Malcolm's stories about Tommy, Michael made a decision that would alter all their lives. He couldn't replace his son, but he could honor Tommy's commitment to these boys and ensure that his final efforts weren't in vain. "I want to help you," he told the twins as they prepared to leave the cemetery. "Tommy believed in you, and I'd like to continue what he started. Would you be willing to let me mentor you through your transition to Brunswick?" The boys exchanged surprised looks, clearly not expecting this offer from the grieving father they had just met. "Are you sure?" Marcus asked cautiously. "We don't want to be any trouble." Michael's response was immediate and firm. "You were important to my son. That makes you important to me." The consequences of this decision began to unfold immediately. First, Michael had to contact the twins' Mass family. Their grandmother, Ruth Wilson, who had raised them since their mother's death, was understandably suspicious of this sudden interest from a wealthy white doctor. It took several meetings, cups of tea, and honest conversations about Tommy for her to begin trusting Michael's intentions. His colleagues at the hospital noticed changes in his schedule as he rearranged surgeries to make time for mentoring sessions. Some questioned his judgment, suggesting that throwing himself into helping these boys might be an unhealthy response to grief. Others, particularly those who had known Tommy, understood and supported his decision. The most significant immediate consequence came from the Brunswick Preparatory Academy administration. When Michael approached them about providing additional support for the twins' transition, he encountered resistance. Some board members worried that 2 scholarship students from the inner city might change the school's culture. This resistance awakened something in Michael that had been dormant since Tommy's death: his fighting spirit. He found himself advocating for Marcus and Malcolm with the same intensity he brought to difficult surgeries, refusing to accept anything less than full support for their success. "My son saw their potential," he told the board firmly. "He gave his last hours on earth to helping them reach it. I won't let anyone diminish that legacy." His passion, combined with his status as both a prominent surgeon and the father of a beloved deceased student, eventually won over the administration. But the victory came with personal costs. Several of his wealthy patients, learning of his involvement with those scholarship boys, transferred to other doctors. His social circle, already strained by his grief, grew smaller as some friends distanced themselves from what they saw as his obsession. Sarah, his estranged wife, called from California after hearing about his decision. "Michael," she said, her voice a mix of concern and disapproval, "you can't replace Tommy with these boys." "I'm not trying to replace him," he responded. "I'm trying to honor him." The most profound consequences, however, were emotional. As Michael began spending time with Marcus and Malcolm, helping them prepare for Brunswick and sharing stories about Tommy, he found his grief transforming. The crushing weight of loss began to lift, replaced by a sense of purpose he hadn't felt since the accident. The twins' presence in his life forced him to maintain a regular schedule, to eat proper meals. Ruth insisted on feeding him whenever he visited, and to engage with the world again. Their questions about Tommy allowed him to share memories he had been too painful to voice before. There were challenging consequences as well. Taking on this mentorship meant confronting his own biases and privileges, learning about the obstacles the twins faced that Tommy had never experienced. It meant navigating racial and social dynamics he had previously been able to ignore. Some days, the weight of responsibility felt overwhelming. What if he failed these boys? What if he couldn't live up to Tommy's example? The pressure to honor his son's legacy while helping Marcus and Malcolm succeed sometimes kept him awake at night. But when he watched the twins tackle complex mathematical problems with the same determination Tommy had shown, or when they excitedly shared their hopes for the future, Michael knew he had made the right decision. His son had seen something special in these boys, something worth sacrificing time and energy to nurture. By continuing Tommy's work, Michael felt closer to his son than he had since the accident. As spring turned to summer and preparations for the twins' first semester at Brunswick intensified, Michael began to understand that his decision hadn't just been about helping two promising students. It was about giving meaning to his loss, about transforming grief into action, and about discovering that sometimes the best way to honor those we've lost is to continue the work they left unfinished. As Michael focused on helping Marcus and Malcolm prepare for Brunswick, a secondary plot began to unfold at the community center where Tommy had tutored them. The center was struggling financially, facing potential closure due to budget cuts and declining donations. Miss Jackson, the elderly program director who had connected Tommy with the twins, reached out to Michael in desperation. "Tommy did more than tutor here," she explained during his first visit. "He inspired other students to believe in themselves. We can't let this place close." The revelation that this vital community resource might disappear struck Michael deeply. Through Miss Jackson's stories, he learned how Tommy had gradually expanded his role at the center, not just tutoring, but organizing study groups, mentoring younger children, and even starting a chess club. Michael found himself drawn into the center's struggle for survival. During his visits, he witnessed firsthand how it provided a safe haven for neighborhood children, many of whom reminded him of Marcus and Malcolm. The thought of these kids losing their support system moved him to action. Drawing on his connections in Boston's medical community, Michael began organizing fundraisers. He shared Tommy's story and his own journey of discovery through the twins, using their success to illustrate the center's vital role in bridging educational gaps. This secondary mission brought unexpected allies. Other parents whose children had volunteered alongside Tommy came forward with support. Medical colleagues, impressed by the twins' academic potential, began offering their own time and resources. The community center's plight also caught the attention of local media, particularly when they learned about the connection between the deceased son of a prominent surgeon and two scholarship students from the neighborhood. The resulting publicity sparked discussions about educational inequality and the importance of community programs. Miss Jackson watched these developments with a knowing smile. "Tommy always said his father could move mountains when he set his mind to it," she told Michael one afternoon. "He'd be proud to see you fighting for these kids." The secondary plot served to deepen the main story, showing how Tommy's influence had extended far beyond just Marcus and Malcolm. It also provided Michael with a broader context for understanding his son's commitment to making a difference in others' lives. As support for the center grew, Michael found himself increasingly invested in its mission. What had started as a tribute to Tommy was evolving into something more. A commitment to ensuring that other children would have the same opportunities his son had helped create for the twins. This parallel story of the community center's revival added layers to the narrative of healing and transformation. It showed how positive change could ripple outward, touching many lives in unexpected ways. The secondary plot also brought new challenges and relationships into Michael's life, further pushing him out of the isolation of his grief. Through his involvement with the center, he began to see his son's world through new eyes. Understanding the passion that had driven Tommy to dedicate so much of his time to helping others. As summer progressed, the future of both the community center and the twins became intertwined in ways that would test everyone's commitment and reveal unexpected connections. The secondary plot was setting the stage for developments that would impact not just individual lives, but an entire community. As summer progressed, the relationships between Michael, the twins, and their extended circle began to evolve in unexpected ways. The initial awkwardness between Michael and Ruth Wilson, the twins' grandmother, gradually transformed into a warm friendship built on their shared concern for the boys' future. Ruth, who had initially been wary of Michael's intentions, began inviting him to stay for dinner after tutoring sessions. These meals became a time for sharing stories. Ruth telling tales of the twins' childhood mishaps, Michael recounting memories of Tommy that he had previously kept locked away in his grief. "Your boy," Ruth said one evening as they watched the twins practicing chess in the living room, "he saw something in my boys that even I hadn't recognized. He gave them permission to dream bigger." The twins themselves began to open up more to Michael, their relationship shifting from formal mentorship to something deeper. They started sharing not just their academic challenges, but their personal hopes and fears. Malcolm, the quieter of the two, confided his anxieties about fitting in at Brunswick. Marcus worried about leaving their grandmother alone while they attended school. Michael found himself growing increasingly protective of the boys, much as he had been with Tommy. When Marcus caught the flu and had to miss a week of summer preparation classes, Michael rearranged his surgery schedule to bring him soup and help him catch up on coursework. When Malcolm's old laptop crashed, Michael didn't hesitate to buy him a new one, the same model Tommy had used. The relationship with Ms. Jackson at the community center added another dimension to their growing family circle. She became a bridge between Michael's world and the community Tommy had served, helping him understand the broader impact of his son's volunteer work. Tommy never saw boundaries, Ms. Jackson told him during one of their planning sessions for the center's fundraiser. Not race, not class, not any of the things that usually keep people apart. He just saw potential waiting to be nurtured. Even Michael's relationship with his ex-wife, Sarah, began to shift. After initially questioning his involvement with the twins, she flew in from California to see for herself what was happening. Meeting Marcus and Malcolm, seeing how they connected to Tommy's memory while being their own unique selves, helped her begin processing her grief in new ways. "I see why you're doing this," she told Michael after watching him work with the boys on their summer reading assignments. "It's not about replacing Tommy. It's about continuing what he started." The most significant relationship development occurred between Marcus and Malcolm themselves. Their bond as twins had always been strong, but the challenge of preparing for Brunswick while helping with the community center fundraiser pushed them to lean on each other in new ways. Michael watched as they developed a studying system, similar to how he and Tommy used to work together. One twin explaining concepts to the other, trading roles as they mastered different subjects. These evolving relationships created a support network that strengthened everyone involved. Sunday dinners at Ruth's house became a regular tradition, with Michael learning to appreciate her traditional soul food cooking while she good-naturedly critiqued his attempts to help in the kitchen. Miss Jackson often joined them, bringing updates about the community center and stories about other students following in the twins' footsteps. One evening, as they all sat around Ruth's dining table, Malcolm looked up from his plate with a thoughtful expression. "You know what Tommy used to say? He said family isn't about who you're born to, it's about who you choose to be there for." The words hung in the air for a moment, acknowledging what they had all begun to feel, that their different paths of grief and hope had led them to create something new together. Not a replacement for what any of them had lost, but a new kind of family built on shared purpose and understanding. As summer drew to a close and the start of school approached, these strengthened relationships would prove crucial in facing the challenges ahead. They had become more than mentor and students, more than neighbors helping neighbors. They had become a family forged by Tommy's legacy and their own choice to support each other. The climactic moment arrived on the evening before Brunswick's fall semester was set to begin. Michael had organized a small celebration dinner at his home for the twins' upcoming first day, inviting Ruth, Miss Jackson, and several key supporters from the community center. As they gathered in his dining room, a space that had been empty and silent since Tommy's death, Michael prepared to make an announcement. He had been working secretly with Brunswick's board of directors, and the timing felt right to share the news. But before he could speak, an unexpected visitor arrived. Sarah, his ex-wife, walked in carrying a large box wrapped in blue paper, Brunswick's colors. The room fell silent as she approached the twins. "I found these in Tommy's room in California," she said softly, handing them the package. "I think he meant them for you." With trembling hands, Marcus and Malcolm opened the box. Inside were 2 Brunswick blazers, carefully pressed and wrapped in tissue paper. Pinned to each was a note in Tommy's handwriting. "For when you make it, never doubted you would." The discovery that Tommy had bought these blazers, believing so completely in the twins' success that he had prepared for it in advance, overwhelmed everyone in the room. Ruth dabbed at her eyes with her handkerchief, while Ms. Jackson gripped Michael's arm for support. Michael, fighting back his own tears, knew this was the moment to share his news. "Tommy believed in you boys," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "And he was right, which is why I'm announcing tonight the establishment of the Thomas Davidson Memorial Scholarship Fund." He explained how he had worked with Brunswick to create a permanent scholarship program for students from the community center. The fund would ensure that every year, promising students like Marcus and Malcolm would have the same opportunity Tommy had fought to give them. "But that's not all," he continued, turning to Miss Jackson. "The hospital board has agreed to partner with the community center. We're establishing a medical mentorship program, connecting students interested in healthcare with doctors who can guide them, just like Tommy guided you too." The announcement was met with stunned silence, followed by an eruption of joy and tears. Ruth pulled both twins into a fierce hug, while Miss Jackson began immediately making plans for implementing the new program. In the midst of the celebration, Malcolm slipped away to Tommy's old room, which Michael had preserved exactly as it was. A few minutes later, Marcus found him there, both boys now wearing their blazers, standing before the mirror. Michael, following them, stopped in the doorway. The sight of the twins in their Brunswick blazers standing in his son's room created a powerful image of past and future merged together. "You would have been proud, son," he whispered to Tommy's photo on the dresser. "They're going to make you proud." Sarah appeared beside him, slipping her hand into his for the first time since their separation. In that moment, surrounded by this unlikely family brought together by tragedy and hope, Michael felt Tommy's presence more strongly than he had since the accident. The climactic event had transformed what began as a chance encounter at a cemetery into something permanent and meaningful. A legacy that would continue to change lives long into the future. The morning of Marcus and Malcolm's first day at Brunswick brought both celebration and challenge. As Michael drove the twins to school in Tommy's old car, which he had preserved but never used until now, the atmosphere was tense with anticipation and underlying anxiety. Brunswick Preparatory Academy's imposing brick buildings and manicured lawns represented both opportunity and obstacle. Despite the scholarship program announcement, not everyone at Brunswick welcomed the changes it would bring. As they pulled up to the entrance, Michael noticed the stares from other parents and students. "Remember what Tommy always said," Michael told the twins as they prepared to step out. "You belong here as much as anyone else." The first test of their resolve came almost immediately. As they walked toward the administration building, they overheard a group of students making comments about charity cases and lowering standards. Michael felt the twins stiffen beside him, but before he could intervene, an unexpected ally appeared. Dr. Harrison, Tommy's former chemistry teacher, stepped forward. "Gentlemen," he addressed the gossiping students, "Thomas Davidson scored the highest grade in my AP chemistry class while tutoring these young men. If they learned from him, I expect them to do even better." This direct confrontation of the prejudice they faced marked the beginning of their attempt to resolve the larger conflicts at play. Michael realized that establishing the scholarship fund had been the easy part. Creating true acceptance would be harder. Working with Dr. Harrison and other sympathetic faculty members, Michael helped develop an integration program. They organized mixed study groups, ensuring that scholarship students and traditional students worked together. The chess club Tommy had loved became a bridge between different social groups. Ruth contributed to the resolution effort in her own way, inviting skeptical parents to her home for her famous Sunday dinners. Nothing breaks down barriers like breaking bread together, she insisted. Over plates of her soul food, even the most resistant parents found their prejudices weakening. Sarah, who had decided to stay in Boston temporarily, took on the role of parent liaison. Her experience as both a Brunswick parent and someone who had learned to overcome her own initial doubts made her particularly effective at addressing other parents' concerns. The community center played a crucial role in the resolution process. Michael arranged for Brunswick students to volunteer there, reversing the usual dynamic. Watching their classmates struggle with math problems they found easy helped build Marcus and Malcolm's confidence while earning them respect from their peers. However, the resolution attempt faced significant challenges. Some board members still resisted the changes, arguing that too much accommodation would diminish Brunswick's prestigious reputation. The twins faced subtle forms of exclusion, invitations that somehow never arrived, study groups that were mysteriously full. Michael found himself fighting battles on multiple fronts. At the hospital, some colleagues questioned his divided focus. At Brunswick, he navigated complex racial and social dynamics he had never had to consider before. Even some of Tommy's old friends seemed uncertain about their former classmates' legacy being tied to such controversial changes. The most difficult moment came when Marcus overheard someone suggest that Tommy had helped them out of pity rather than belief in their abilities. The comment shook both twins deeply, making them question everything they had worked for. This crisis forced Michael to confront the deeper aspects of their situation. During a long evening discussion in Tommy's room, surrounded by his son's belongings, Michael shared something he had never told anyone. The night of the accident, he revealed, Tommy called me. He was excited about your practice test scores, saying you two were going to change Brunswick forever. His last words to me were about you, about how proud he was to be part of your journey. This revelation became a turning point in their resolution efforts. The twins' confidence, bolstered by this concrete proof of Tommy's faith in them, became unshakable. They threw themselves into their studies with renewed determination, while also actively participating in building bridges between different student groups. Gradually, the resolution attempt began to show results. The twins' academic excellence spoke for itself. Their presence in top classes, their contributions to school discussions, and their success in chess tournaments began to change perceptions. Other students, particularly those who took part in the community center program, became allies and friends. The resolution wasn't perfect. Prejudice and privilege don't disappear overnight, but it was progress. As the first semester progressed, the focus began to shift from the twins being scholarship students to simply being Brunswick students, each with their own unique strengths and contributions. Michael, watching this transformation, realized that true resolution often comes not from eliminating conflicts entirely, but from changing how people approach and understand them. Tommy had understood this instinctively, that bringing people together despite their differences was the first step toward meaningful change. The true turning point came during Brunswick's winter semester, when Marcus and Malcolm organized a memorial event for Tommy. What started as a small gathering to honor their tutor grew into something much more significant, a celebration of inclusion and breaking barriers that brought together the entire Brunswick community with the families from the community center. In the school's grand auditorium, the twins stood before a diverse crowd and shared their story. They spoke not just about Tommy's tutoring, but about his vision of what Brunswick could become, a place where excellence and opportunity weren't limited by zip code or skin color. The event marked a clear shift in the school's culture. Watching his son's legacy transform from personal grief to institutional change, Michael realized that their journey had moved beyond just honoring Tommy's memory. They were creating something new, a model for how education could bridge social divides. This realization led to a new direction for everyone involved. The Thomas Davidson Memorial Scholarship Fund expanded its mission, partnering with other private schools in the region to create similar programs. Ruth began mentoring other grandparents whose grandchildren received scholarships, helping them navigate this new world of opportunities. Sarah made a surprising announcement. She was moving back to Boston permanently to help coordinate the growing network of parent supporters. Her experience in educational consulting proved invaluable as the program expanded to other schools. The community center, once fighting for survival, became a hub for educational innovation. Dr. Harrison and other Brunswick teachers began offering advanced classes there, while community center students brought fresh perspectives to Brunswick's classrooms. For Michael, this turning point meant reimagining his own role. He reduced his surgery schedule to spend more time developing the scholarship program and mentoring students. His medical expertise found new purpose in creating healthcare education programs for underserved communities. Marcus and Malcolm, now thriving at Brunswick, began mentoring younger students themselves, carrying forward Tommy's legacy in their own way. Their success inspired others, creating a ripple effect that reached far beyond the school's walls. This new direction wasn't just about education or opportunity. It was about transforming grief into purpose, about taking Tommy's simple act of tutoring two promising students and expanding it into a movement for change. As Michael stood in the auditorium after the memorial event, watching the twins interact confidently with their classmates and teachers, he felt a profound sense of rightness. They had found their way forward, not by trying to replace what was lost, but by building something new from its foundation. 1 year after finding the twins at Tommy's grave, Michael stood in the same spot, but this time he wasn't alone. Marcus and Malcolm stood beside him, along with Ruth, Sarah, and a growing extended family of supporters and friends. Each person held a white lily, Tommy's favorite flower. The changes in everyone were profound. Michael had transformed from a grief-stricken father into a man with renewed purpose. His face, once lined with sorrow, now showed signs of healing. He had learned to talk about Tommy not with devastating pain, but with pride and purpose, sharing stories that inspired others to carry forward his son's legacy of inclusion and compassion. "I thought I was just helping two boys Tommy believed in," Michael reflected, placing his lily on the grave. "Instead, they helped me understand why he believed in them so much." The twins had grown too, not just academically but in confidence and character. Top students at Brunswick now, they carried themselves with a quiet assurance that came from knowing they had earned their place. More importantly, they had learned to balance academic success with Tommy's spirit of giving back. "Tommy taught us that success isn't just about what you achieve," Marcus said during a mentoring session with younger students. "It's about who you help along the way." Malcolm nodded in agreement. "He showed us that barriers can be broken, but someone has to be brave enough to take the first step." Ruth's growth was equally remarkable. From a grandmother worried about her boys entering an unfamiliar world, she had become a confident advocate for educational equity. Other parents sought her advice, and her home had become a gathering place for families navigating similar journeys. Sarah had found healing through her involvement with the scholarship program. Working with new families helped her process her grief while honoring Tommy's memory in practical ways. Her relationship with Michael, while not romantic, had evolved into a strong partnership focused on continuing their son's work. The Brunswick community itself showed signs of transformation. The initial resistance to change had given way to pride in the school's growing diversity and the academic achievements of scholarship students. Tommy's vision of a more inclusive Brunswick was becoming reality. Even Miss Jackson, who had seen many programs come and go at the community center, marveled at the changes. "Tommy planted a seed," she often said, "but all of you helped it grow into something beautiful." Michael's medical colleagues noticed the change in him as well. The surgeon who had once been solely focused on his career now brought a deeper understanding of community health and social factors to his practice. His patients benefited from his expanded perspective on healing. As they stood together at the grave, each person reflected on their journey. The pain of loss hadn't disappeared, but it had been transformed into something meaningful. Tommy's death had created an unexpected ripple effect, bringing together people who might never have met, challenging assumptions and creating opportunities for genuine understanding across social divides. Sometimes, Michael said softly, it takes seeing ourselves through someone else's eyes to understand who we really are and who we can become. The growth they had experienced, individually and collectively, proved that even the deepest wounds could lead to healing and transformation when people chose to face them together. On graduation day, as Marcus and Malcolm walked across Brunswick's stage to receive their diplomas, the auditorium thundered with applause. In the audience, Michael sat between Ruth and Sarah, all of them beaming with pride. The twins had finished first and second in their class, but their true achievement went beyond academic success. They had helped transform Brunswick from an exclusive institution into a model of educational equity, proving that excellence and inclusivity could strengthen each other. At the podium, delivering the valedictorian speech, Marcus spoke words that captured the journey they had all taken. 3 years ago, my brother and I stood at the grave of a friend who believed we could be more than our circumstances. Today, we stand here because of a community that grew from one person's belief in possibility. Malcolm continued. Tommy Davidson taught us that bridges can be built between any divides if people are willing to take the first step. His father showed us that grief can become grace when we open our hearts to unexpected connections. The themes that had defined their story resonated through the ceremony. The power of belief in others, the strength found in unlikely friendships, the way loss can transform into legacy when people choose to carry forward the best in those they've lost. As the graduates threw their caps into the air, Michael looked up at the blue sky and smiled. Tommy's gift hadn't just been tutoring 2 promising students, it had been showing them all how to see beyond the barriers that too often divide people, how to transform tragedy into triumph, and how to build family from friendship. The real miracle wasn't just what they had achieved, but who they had become together.